Hello, happy Christmas, you bastard.
Oh, my goodness. What happened to the intro music? Where's the abuse? What's going on?
Well,
intro, man.
Keith, I've been secretly thinking for some time now that, panpsychists are basically... Oh!
We are live, Philip.
I've been thinking for some time now that panpsychists are essentially working class heroes and illusionists are basically bourgeois enemies of the proletariat. And, I thought it was just basically time I said that in line with my Christmas jumper.
Bloody hell. You're straight into it today. No intro music. No hello, Keith. None of this.
Just you bastard.
Just straight on to the
anyway.
Well, no. I mean, if we're going to talk about working class credentials, there, Philip, then we could be getting into a real competition.
Are you what
illusionism?
I'm gone.
Yeah, no. Illusionism is the doctrine of the people. Definitely.
Doctrine of the people. Illusionism.
Absolutely.
There's nothing more bourgeois than saying, oh, it's all a fancy illusion. That is clearly...
No, it's not. What's an illusion is the fancy, non-effectual, intrinsic stuff that does nothing, that just sits there at the heart of matter, idly living off the rent of the functional stuff that's being done by the brain. It's all about the hard work that's being done by the neurons. That's where it's not like these idle, phenomenal properties just sitting there living off the hard work of the working brain. Nonsense.
I'm very impressed by that response, actually. I didn't tell you I was going to say that, and I'm very impressed by your response. Quick-witted, aren't you? How are you doing, anyway?
No, you took me completely by surprise there, but that's right.
Well, I said it. I said "Happy Christmas, you bastard," and then I started playing back to myself in my ear, so that was why the pause. Anyway, we're all going to be very messy.
That was quite an intro. That was good. This is supposed... I thought it's supposed to be like Christmas thing. It's going to be straight in there with the word. I don't know. I don't know if I can trust you. All this. Come on. Let's make it Christmassy. I have Bob Dylan Christmas in the Heart playing in the background. Shall I put it back on? Yeah, try and cheer us up.
Go on.
Okay.
Yeah, I've never really listened to much Bob Dylan. I don't know why.
You what?
I know. I don't know.
Well, now that's... You've said everything you need to say.
His voice annoys me a bit. I don't know. Sorry about that.
Oh, dear.
Anyway, having a gin and tonic here. What are you having? You're not as much of a drinker as me, are you?
Coffee. It's coffee, but
right.
It's in a nice
coffee at this time. You're not going to sleep.
I need it, man, to keep up with you and your unexpected...
It's true.
Attacks from random directions. Right.
What have you been up to, Keith?
What have I been up to? I've been trying to recover from a somewhat stressful year. It's not... I think the same goes for you too. I know that it's not been a complete... I'm going to just actually turn Bob down just now. I know it's not been a fantastic year for either of us. In some ways, we've had some difficult things, lost people. But I'm looking forward to Christmas. I'm looking forward to getting together with family and trying to appreciate the things that make life matter. Yes, and I hope you are going to have time to do the same. But we're not here to... So that came out quite... you've got me all
your voice has got a bit more Yorkshire. Because I've challenged you on your working class credentials.
Listen, lad. If you want to fight on that ground, I'm ready anytime. Sorry. Come on. I haven't even been drinking. Let's do a little bit of philosophy, and then let's take some questions from our wonderful supporters on 23 of them watching, so I'm sure they've all got good questions. Tell me, first of all, What have you been up to? I mean, you sorted out consciousness. You got that nailed down, finished. Okay. You worked out the purpose of the universe. Okay, good. You pretty much got Christianity back on track on where it should be. So I've still got the Yorkshire accent. What's next, Philip? What do you want? I mean, what big thing can be next?
Well, I've actually been this term thinking a lot about quantum mechanics, actually. Just another bit of a challenge there, sorted everything else out.
Yes,
I was a couple of weeks ago, a few weeks ago, speaking to our physicists about this in my university, which I was pretty scared. I was thinking, what the fuck am I doing? I didn't study science or mathematics after 16, and I'm talking to physicists about quantum mechanics, and I was a bit worried about that. I think it went all right, though, unless they were just being nice to me. But yeah, do you want to hear a bit about that?
Go on then. Tell me. I bet I can guess what's going to come back. No, you tell me.
Well, yeah. I've been to be clear, this is not a topic I would work on my own, not having a physics background. But I've been exploring this with some excellent philosophers of physics, Kelvin McQueen from Chapman University, and also William Simpson, who is this year doing an early career fellowship under my mentorship, and he has a PhD in philosophy and a PhD in physics. So it's been very useful to help me work through the details of this. But yeah, I've been re-exploring a sort of neglected interpretation of quantum mechanics by a physicist called Ewan Squires in the 1990s, and who happened to be at my University of Durham just by chance. I kind of came across this and then just noticed he was at my university. Tried to get in touch with him, but he passed away a little bit before his time. Maybe he would have developed these ideas in more detail. But yeah, it's sort of got a little bit forgotten about, and I've been sort of re-exploring it. And the basic idea, obviously there's a lot of intricacies here, but the basic idea is a version of the many worlds, right? So where reality keeps branching into different versions of itself. But the crucial difference is, and I think you might guess where this is going, consciousness only goes down one of the branches, right? So just to make that clear, if you if you imagine Schrodinger's cat story, where on the many worlds, reality's gonna. So I'm Schrodinger's cat, and I'm the observer about to open the box. On the many worlds view, reality, including me, the observer, branches. Well, on Ewan Squires' view, my body branches, and one body is gonna get light waves from a living cat. One body is gonna get light waves from a dead cat. And of course, there'll be many more versions. But my conscious mind just goes down one of those branches. So my conscious mind is going to go in a body that sees a living cat and a body that sees a dead cat.
You're shedding zombies all the time.
Well, that's one worry that you might have with this, that Ewan appreciates when he wrote on this, that well, there's a worry we're all going to end up going down different branches, right? So you and I, Keith, are doing Schrodinger's cat experiment together. I might go down my conscious mind might go down the living cat branch. Your conscious mind might go down the dead cat branch, and I'm going to end up talking to a zombie Keith. I mean, you're already kind of already, and you're going to end up talking to a zombie Philip.
My intuition is that it's going to be overwhelmingly likely that everybody else is zombies apart from me, isn't it?
Absolutely. No, well, it's something's obviously got to be done to deal with this. But well, what Squires brings in at this point is what he calls universal consciousness, that we're somehow all comprised of, and it's sort of somehow selecting which branch to go down. And the issue that got me interested in this is he's a little bit vague about what he's talking about. Actually, in a later paper, he decided, no, there's only one mind. But still, he's a little bit vague about how we make sense of that. And so he's a physicist rather than a philosopher. So all that, it was a little bit sort of not working out the details. So what I'm trying to do really is, so with Kelvin's been thinking about whether we can make sense of the kind of mathematical details. But what I've been thinking of is, can the contemporary literature, panpsychist literature, for example, on cosmopsychism, help us make sense of this universal consciousness idea and how we connect to it? But just to throw in the point of this, really, before we press the worries, which there are many. The hope is we can make sense of probabilities. So the big challenge to the many worlds view, huge literature on this, is, can you make sense of probability in a world where kind of everything's happening? So just come back to Schrodinger's cat again. We could set it up so there's a 75% chance there'll be a living cat and a 25% chance there'll be a dead cat. But it looks like if many worlds is true, you should think, well, there's a 100% chance there'll be a version of me that sees a living cat and 100% chance there'll be a version of me that sees a dead cat. So probability seems to drop out of the picture. And that seems particularly worrying because the evidence for quantum mechanics is rooted in certain claims about probability. So if we can't make sense of that, there's a worry many worlds undermines its own evidential base. Anyway, so the thought is, well, if consciousness is just going down one of the branches, we can make sense of probability again. So if there's a 75% chance I'm going to see a living cat, we analyze that as there's a 75% chance consciousness is going to go down the living cat branch.
Everybody's consciousness. The universe is conscious. Whose consciousness are we talking about here?
Yeah. So Squires talks about this universal consciousness and is very vague about, well, what's it got to do with our minds? So I've been bringing in some of the discussions of cosmopsychism, where some versions of cosmopsychism where the universe is conscious. Our minds are parts or aspects of the universe. The conscious universe is the fundamental thing. Our minds are aspects of that. And in that sense, our minds are, in some sense, reducible to the mind that is the universe as a whole. So then the thought is, if we can make sense of something like that in Squire's view, then it's this, what he calls universal consciousness, that's selecting the branch. But that doesn't rule out me doing stuff, because my mind and everything my mind does is wholly reducible to what the conscious universe does, or the universal consciousness.
Apart from the word consciousness, this doesn't sound all that different from physicalism. At least as far as the agency part goes.
Yeah, you could have a physicalist version of this where you just have two things, that on the many worlds, it's the wave function that's fundamental, but let's not put that to one side. You've got a sort of branching universe, and then you've got this other thing that's selecting which branch to go down in some sense of selection.
Yeah.
One motivation for bringing in consciousness, you do get a lot of mockery of bringing consciousness and quantum mechanics together. People say, oh, it's just two mysterious things and you're just shoving them together. The kind of a thing annoying people like you would say, Keith. But if, like me, you already think consciousness is fundamental, and if you have this worry, as many do, about probability and quantum mechanics, if you can solve both problems at once, you can, bring consciousness into our scientific story and solve this probability worry. You've got to kill two birds with one stone. Then maybe there's a sort of
positive way of saying the same thing.
A positive way of saying what? Sorry.
They're saying the thing about two mysteries, sort of, you kill two birds with one stone.
That's the hope.
I listened this afternoon to a talk you gave Durham on this, and I'm not in a position to engage with the detail at all. And I readily accept and applaud the intelligence and the intellectual rigor with which you approach this. You really, there are so many different pathways that one can go down here, and you explore them and evaluate them in relative to each other, and you look at the objections and so on. You do a fine job of that. I've nothing but respect for the way you do it. But can we just talk about the general methodology that here, which seems to me very awkward, in that it's, on the one hand, you have what physicists are doing, which is driven by mathematical frameworks of immense complexity. and supply all sorts of, and ultimately, of course, by they might need to explain observation, but also to make a simple and unified, coherent picture of everything. And strange things have emerged from that. Relativity theory and then quantum theory, and then they need to try and unify these, and it's immensely complex stuff, and it has its own logic, and who knows really where it's going to go. And I think good physicists just follow wherever it takes them. They don't impose common sense constraints on this. If you did, you just wouldn't get to where we are. If you thought in terms of, I don't know, Kantian categories of three-dimensional space and time and so on, if you thought, no, that's a sort of a priori limit on our theorizing about the world, as I guess Kant, I don't want to be unfair to him, then you just wouldn't have got to modern physics. You've got to throw everything out of the window. Okay. But then you're trying to link this with something that is entirely common sense, everyday, folk psychological, just our own acquaintance with our own minds, insofar as we can characterize them. And so all we have is, so this is how kind of things seem to me. This is how I seem to me. This is how my mind seems to me. And the idea that gives us a window onto something that can be used to complete or fill out, help resolve tensions in that the picture that physicists are developing. It seems to me methodologically a rather strange one. No matter how, I mean, and I grant you that there's lots of ways of trying to yoke these things together, and it requires great ingenuity. But doesn't it seem to you that there's a discordance between these two elements?
Well, maybe let's distinguish two issues. One is, save consciousness for a moment. Just thinking of quantum mechanics, I would press strongly there is a real need for philosophy here, because the thing people need to know about quantum mechanics that I think the public don't know, and it's very simple, a very simple point. It's our best scientific theory. So much of our technology is based on it, but there is no consensus on what it is telling us about reality. Zero consensus. And that's a weird position. Usually it's kind of clear what a scientific theory is telling you about the world. And so there are these different theories of what is going on in reality to make the equations of quantum mechanics work. At least for the foreseeable future, some of them are just empirically equivalent. At least for the foreseeable future, it's going to be very hard, if not impossible, to test them. And so it requires philosophical judgment. I mean, one way to bring that out, right? I think there's a good case the many worlds version is the simplest, because it's the only one that just has the Schrödinger equation, the basic mathematical bit. But there's this big problem, prima facie. How do you make sense of probability? So look, here is a philosophical dispute that is at the core of our scientific understanding of the universe. And people like Sean Carroll, who I very much disagree with, we've had on this podcast for 3 hours, 6 hours, and all just me disagreeing with it. Very much appreciate that this is so important. I think we're in a period of history where we've forgotten the importance of philosophy, and the early pioneers of quantum mechanics, most of them, not Schrödinger or Einstein, most of them said, if you want to ask these questions, you're not a scientist. We're going to destroy your career. Horrible stuff was done. And, so I do think we need to think about these philosophically. As for consciousness, well, look, I think that just gets back to our old debate about whether there is something special about consciousness. I think we've got this immediate access to it that's independent of experiments. And, there's good reasons to think that can't be reduced to what we do find in experiments, can't be explicated. And so if you but of course that's hugely controversial, but if you bring these together, then I think you can start to see the motivation. But just very, very finally, again, to repeat, I would never deal with this topic on my own, because it gets hugely complicated. And, I've got Kelvin there particularly for telling me, how this works out in the mathematical details. I mean, helping me understand as best I can. And, you know, so you really need someone who knows the physics to deal with this properly. But I think there's maybe some things I can contribute in helping to clarify Squire's view. I'm not sure whether it makes sense, but just helping to clarify what he was trying to say. And then, you know, we can evaluate it. I think that's a valuable thing to do, to just lay it out more rigorously. And with the help of a philosopher of physics, I think I can do that.
Yeah, I mean, you know, let 1,000 flowers and all that. But I mean, I think even when you say, what is it telling us about reality, you're already there getting deep into some issues in philosophy of science. And it's as it were, I feel when you ask that question, as if what you're asking for is, you're saying, make this make sense to me at a common sense level.
Don't you think physics? Don't you think science tells us about? What are you an instrumentalist, Keith? Or
well,
do
I
you not
might
like
be.
that?
I mean, look, at some point, you know, we're going to reach a point where, well, I think in physics we've long ago reached a point where our common sense intuitions count for nothing. I mean, our interest is about medium-sized stuff, and you know, we can take this as all this as you know, the furniture of the world around us, and we can ask how it works and so on. But when you get down to talking about fundamentals, what is it telling us about reality? I'm not sure that's a well-posed question. I think at some point you're going to end up with something like at low enough level, you're going to get something, you're going to end up with something where you have to take an instrumentalist view, because there's simply nothing further to give the explanation of what the reality behind it is.
But right now, Keith, you're doing philosophy. You can't. Yeah,
well,
look, I just think you can't just do science and not do philosophy, right? You have to. And there's this philosophical dispute between realists and instrumentalists. Is science tell us about so all right, so we have to have that dispute. But
my question to you, with a methodological question, was a philosophical question about the discordance between these. That was itself a methodological question about how you do this inquiry, and certainly philosophical reflection on the framework we're using, the concepts we're using, and so on. My question is how you can use concepts on such totally different domains and expect them to mesh in a productive way.
Right. So okay. So there are now three things in play here. I mean, or there's the need for philosophy and quantum mechanics. There's whether we should bring consciousness in, but then realism versus instrumentalism. Is science telling us about reality? I suppose I do tend to just assume science is trying to get at reality, and I admit I haven't worked very much on that topics. The basic arguments that realists give, as far as I'm aware of them, I find quite persuasive, but I haven't. But yeah, in terms of common sense, well, in terms of this discussion about, consciousness is our pre-theoretical way of thinking about things. Yes, I suppose it is, and in general, I would be on your side that if it's just like our normal way of thinking, who cares? Look to the science to replace our ordinary ways of thinking. But I just think in the case of consciousness, we do have this special epistemic validation because we're immediately aware of our feelings and experiences.
I think if you have that, if you think you have this you know, epistemically unmediated direct access to an aspect of reality, a fundamental aspect of reality, then yeah, sure, you should use that in physics. Absolutely, it's perfectly reasonable to. In fact, it's probably your access to that is more direct than to any of the things that physicists might be talking about. So sure, you're going to want to bottom everything out in that, because it's the only thing you can really be. If you have this radically Cartesian sort of position,
there's going to be a but, isn't there? There's going to be a but.
Well.
I mean, I'm not telling physicists how to do their job, to be clear. I'm just
surprising to me that
fill in the gaps.
Sorry, it seems surprising to me that evolution would have equipped us with that. So you have to suppose that we get this access. It's not through any evolved knowledge generating mechanisms that would give us this. So it has to be something more fundamental, more metaphysically special, and presumably the I, the self that is getting this knowledge, has to be something other than just a complex evolved information processing control system. So it seems to me you're probably going to be forced down some sort of really quite strong dualist route if you're going to go this way. But if you do, then yeah, if you think that's our securest form of knowledge, then yeah, everybody should bow to it, physicists included.
Well, we have to remember that, as I argued in my book, Galileo's Error, quick plug, that physical science kicked off with Galileo separating out the qualitative realm of consciousness from the quantitative realm of physical science. And maybe this is a way of acknowledging what Galileo took out and bringing it back into the scientific picture whilst maintaining that separation. But I'll let you have the last word, Keith.
Okay.
But I want to say one more thing before you do. Two more things. The first thing is, I think we wanted to give 30 minutes of Q&A to people. So after Keith has had his last word, maybe we could go into that. If people just want to put Q in the Q&A, Q. Oh, I see. And put a question up. Secondly, I've run out of ice for my gin and tonic. So but I've got my Bluetooth headphones in. So Keith, you ask your question. I'm going to run downstairs and get some ice, but I'm going to hear what your question is. And then I'll come back and answer. Oh, no, I won't answer it. I won't answer it because you're having the last word, but I'll hear it. Okay. Go.
What is he like? What is he like? I mean, it's okay for you. You're just listening. I have to actually interact with him. Anyway, okay. And I suppose he's overhearing this. I was actually going to say something nice. That I think it's, first of all, what he's doing it with a great deal of intellectual rigor and scrupulousness. I wish he was using that intellect on something that I think is a bit more profitable. But he's a good philosopher. He's a very good philosopher. And I guess it's good that people should be exploring these options, if only to show that they lead nowhere, which I think panpsychism does. And in fact, I've said this many times, and I've written about this, that I think, given the assumptions that Philip starts with, well, yeah, that's a reasonable path to go down. The trouble is, it doesn't lead anywhere. But yeah, explore it. Let's have a look. I mean, after all, physicists themselves are only too prone to do this kind of speculation, and it'd be good to have a few philosophers on board to make them do it a little bit more rigorously. But my inclination ultimately is that we're just not in a position to address these kind of questions at the moment.
I heard you slagging me off.
I said some nice things.
My mother-in-law has just been visiting, and it was my birthday last week. Actually, I noticed she didn't send me a present. By the way,
yes, we were going to have on that.
Sorry, go on.
No, I was going to sing happy birthday to you,
but she bought me some classy gin drafts of gin. There's there's 6 little drafts. This one is called, God, my eyes are getting worse. I'm going to need The Botanist. The Botanist.
Don't have too much of it, or you're...
There's tasting guides here. Hold on, The Botanist. Which one is this? Oh, this is wasting everyone's time, isn't it?
Your micro consciousnesses will start decombining if you're not careful.
I'll try and work out which one this is. Well, okay, should we go to some questions?
Yeah, can I try something out on you first, quickly? I want to try something out on you. Just
okay. We're gonna cut into Q&A, but go on.
Yeah, I wanted to try an idea on you that I think I've got a little analogy for illusionism, and I think that that you will agree that the illusionist is right about this, and I think that it's analogous to qualia. So let's take evil, or indeed we could take good, but evil makes it a bit more vivid. Some people, we say, are evil, and we pick out something significant about them by saying that. I don't think anyone would say, "Well, nobody's evil." Just in the everyday sense of the term, you find your own examples. Now, and some people think that evil is like an irreducible essence, psychological essence that somehow has infected these people. That they were just maybe born evil, and that evil, you can't explain it in terms of their conditioning, their upbringing, their circumstances, perhaps neurological problems, whatever it might be, their traumatic experience or whatever. That none of that really explains their evilness. Their evil is something above all that, and something that deserves merits punishment rather than treatment or correction or whatever. Now, do you believe in evil in that sense, in that intrinsic sense?
Interesting question. I suppose I would. I mean, not quite, but I'm a moral objectivist, so I do think there are,
Oh, I am.
good, bad, right and wrong. But I suppose I'm a sort of, and I'm non-reductionist about moral properties in the way I'm non-reductionist about consciousness. So I suppose I do
Oh,
think good, bad,
interesting.
right and wrong are something over and above all
Oh,
the natural physical stuff. But
okay. Well,
as for evil, I suppose I would think. I suppose I think it would depends how you're cashing it out, but it might be grounded in, rooted in kind of more old-fashioned moral intuitions. And even though I'm a Christian, I'm a sort of heretical Christian, and not really up for what I think of as kind of old-fashioned moral ideas. Maybe evil is a bit old school. I don't even really go for sin. I don't really like sin, really. I mean, nobody likes sin, but I guess the devil likes sin. I don't believe in the devil, but anyway, maybe like sin and evil are more this sort of more old fashioned. But I do think moral properties are something over and above natural properties. So
interesting.
maybe you're trying to caricature me, and
Well,
it's
maybe
just
but
true
let's
of
go
me.
with.
It's just true. It's actually just the view I have.
Okay, well, let's have a hypothetical Philip who says, well, no, there isn't. What we're talking about when we talk about somebody being evil is the character trait that they have developed as a result of their childhood, their experience, maybe trauma they've suffered, maybe neurological issues, maybe all sorts of things. It's explicable in terms of a certain history. This doesn't mean that they aren't evil, that they aren't people who need to be quarantined and kept away from other people and restrained and so on, and perhaps, depending on your views, punished. But there's nothing there in addition to all these developed psychological traits that they have, and perhaps neurological aspects to them.
Yeah.
And the idea that there is a sort of illusion that people have, because they look at the person, they look at their behavior, and they say, they're just evil. Look at them. Just look at the way they're behaving. You can sort of see the evil in their eyes there. And that's not something we can explain, or whether it's developmental psychology, clinical psychology can explain it away. No, they're pure. I see the evil there. It just, when I'm with them, that I would say is an illusion. Okay? It's a way of characterizing a hugely complex set of behaviors and psychological dispositions, which can all be ultimately explained naturalistically. And I think a lot of people would be illusionists about evil in that sense.
Yeah, it's a really nice analogy, and it's a nice analogy, and yeah, I suppose in that sense, I would be an illusionist about evil. Or there's got to be some things in that ballpark, something like that could be, I'm an illusionist about, and most people are. I mean, look, so I guess your question is why the difference with consciousness? And I mean, look, it's very difficult with these foundational questions, and I think all you can do as science and philosophy is start with, this is what we always come back to, Keith, what seems most evident. And me and a lot of a significant minority of other philosophers Actually, I mean, that's maybe a majority, because I think probably most physicalists would fall into the category of what I'm about to say. Just think that, oh, it's going to lead to another dispute probably. There is something here in the ballpark of our feelings and experiences which is evident and close to certain, not necessarily totally certain,
Mhm,
but
mhm, mhm.
whereas evil, okay, you might instinctively feel that, but when you really reflect, you realize you're projecting your emotions and so on. And you know, it's not an argument. It's
I'm
just
not
like careful reflection. We are really going to cut into Q&A. You
no, no,
you
I'm
have the
not
last word. You
just
have
to
the
be
last
clear,
word on this.
just
Gum,
to be clear, I
gum.
wasn't that wasn't meant to be an argument. It was meant to be an
Oh
illustration of
yeah.
how
Oh no, 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 no,
illusionist
no. I was
thinking,
saying,
an
I was
analogy.
saying my response. I was saying my response wasn't an
Yeah, yeah,
argument.
yeah.
I was
But it's,
saying
it's
my
it, it
response wasn't an argument.
it doesn't really need a response in that it's a sort of way into the illusionist perspective on things. And I'm suggesting that if you take that analogy
Yeah,
and try and
excellent.
apply it, you might see the illusionist thing might look a bit more plausible to you. Um,
I like that. I like that. I
I
think that
mean, it's
is a
not.
nice.
I'm not saying there's no response to it. Of course there is. It's an invitation, not an argument.
Yeah, so I don't think what I was saying was an argument in response, and maybe if we see what you're doing, as you just said, not as an argument, but as a way of illustrating and making vivid and compelling the illusionist position, in a way that might persuade people when they get
Right.
that clear idea of it. That might be. I really like that. Should we
Come on,
should we come to Q and A,
let's
because
do some
I've got to
questions.
feed some kids,
Yeah, I
and
know. Uh,
uh,
if-
okay.
shall I ask you questions if they're for you? Which where do you want? Oh, you've got it there.
The
Okay,
first one is so I'm just going in order of people who've put
okay, good
Q.
idea.
Goth
Go.
panprodopsychism thoughts. I
Hmm.
guess that should be a comma after panprodopsychism. Mike, let's try and get through lots of questions. Basically, I give a lot of I've a certain amount of I defend panpsychism, and I think it's more likely than any other theory, but only just maybe 55-60%, same as my credence in Christianity for that matter. Heretical Christianity. But I would give my next best, I would give a huge amount of credence to panprodopsychism, the view that there's something down there that underlies the mathematical structures of physics. It's not consciousness, but it's somehow intrinsically suited to give rise to consciousness. And that's a real possibility. But it introduces mystery when you don't need to, because we have no positive account, I don't think, of what pan-proto-psychic, of what proto-consciousness might be. Sam Coleman's done very good stuff trying to spell that out, similar to how Bertrand Russell actually did, but I don't buy it myself. Okay, next question. This is a question for Mind Chat. Is there a consensus among the relevant physicists stroke philosophers of physics that any of the constants could have been otherwise? Exclude logical epistemic possibility. I guess this is prompted by recent discussions about fine-tuning that some strange people have been having. What do you think of this before I say something, Keith? Do you want to say anything about this?
Uh, as far as look, I mean, I'm no expert in this, but my understanding is that the debate is precisely on epistemic possibility. For all we know, they could have been otherwise. There may be something that constrains them to those particular values that we have yet to some principle that we have yet to discover. So I think it's all about epistemic possibility.
Yeah, I would say that's I mean, like, that's what I was going to say as well. I suppose the fine tuning argument that I put forward, or defenders of the multiverse put forward, is the worked out academic versions of them are rooted in Bayesian reasoning, which is about epistemic possibility.
Yeah.
The example I love to give ad nauseum is, if you're on a game show and the prize is behind one of three doors, the prize is definitely behind one door, and there might be a mechanism so that it's always behind one door. But in the absence of that knowledge, you say it's 1 in 3 chance, because that's the epistemic probability relative to what you know. But yes. Oh no, another question. And or any of the constraints cannot, in principle, most probably be explained by future theories. So if you're thinking about, I suspect this is a common response to fine tuning, common response to fine-tuning, not so much in the academic literature, but in sort of on Twitter, and a little bit in the academic literature maybe. And my response would be, look, future physics. Actually, what I've said is a little bit unfair, because I talk to a lot of physicists about this. Very few say, oh, it's not right that the numbers have to be a certain way for life to be possible. But I think the evidence is going to change. I think the evidence is going to change. So I find a lot of Roger Penrose seems to say something like that. So it's not denying that physics is fine-tuned for life in a sense that I would use that term. Keith is worried about the definition of that maybe, but in the sense that for life to be possible, the numbers have to be thus fall in a very narrow range. Roger Penrose says, yes, that's true in our current physics, but I think it will change. And my response to that is, yeah, physics will change. Maybe there'll be less fine-tuning. Maybe there'll be more fine-tuning, but it's the definition of a bias to say all we can ever do is work with the evidence we currently have, right? It's the definition of bias to say, oh, well, the evidence we currently have supports cosmic purpose. I don't like that. I'm going to wait and see while the evidence changes. Now, that's not to say there's nothing to debate here. There's lots of important ways of saying, can we make sense of these probabilities? Does this argument make sense? But that's what I'd say specifically to, future physics might deal with this. Sorry, I'm going to try and talk quicker. Tim and should we go to people who haven't asked questions yet, or I'll give a quick one to Tim Ange, who's already asked one. Golf pan-protopsychist gin tonic. Pan-protopsychist analysis of consciousness to support the a priori entailment. Yeah, I can see the motivation for that. If you're motivated by the combination problem that you just couldn't put little consciousnesses together to get an a priori entailment to our consciousness, then you might say, well, there must be something else here. Dirk Perreboom says this in his version, actually. Dirk Perreboom had a book in 2011 arguing that either illusionism or something panpsychisty is correct, and leaving it open which is correct. He's had a later book having a combination of the two that I haven't read. Why haven't I read? Oh no, paper. I should bloody read that paper. Anyway, but I can see the motivation for that. I suppose I'm more and more inclined to be radically non-reductionist about our consciousness anyway. But I can see the argument there. So that's why I still go for panpsychism. Natesh Ganesh, hi, good to hear from you. What you all think about viewing our first stroke third person descriptions being similar to position stroke momentum descriptions with respect to uncertainty principles? One can't know both accurately and simultaneously. Bloody hell, that's a mind-blowing question. Keith, you can handle this one. It's too hard for me. Very interesting.
I disagree. I think one can know both accurately and simultaneously.
Okay.
That's I don't think they are. I don't think there's some sort of. They're just different perspectives on the same reality, and there's nothing. That's no sort of. I mean, no, I don't think there's a parallel there to this sort of indeterminacy you find in physics now.
It's something I'm going to think about more when I haven't had 2 gin and tonics. Let me know if you'd like to hear the tasting notes for my current gin and tonic. You can ask that in the chat and I'll answer that. Okay, Tim Ange, thoughts on Richard Brown's Shombies? And then there's a little explanation of these. Coherence of the hypothesis that physical duplicates are all that's fundamental, but experience exists. So just to fill people in on this, annoying people like me say, oh, you could have all the physical, you could conceive of all the physical stuff without consciousness, and that shows that consciousness is extra to the physical stuff. But Richard Brown responds, well, why couldn't you have a different thought experiment where physicalism is true, there's just physical stuff, that's all there is, but there's consciousness. So it's sort of like physicalism is conceivably true, and therefore it's possibly true. So whereas people like me say anti-physicalism is conceivably true, but therefore it's possibly true, you know, Brown says, well, physicalism is conceivably true, therefore it's possibly true. And Keith, you have a version of this, don't you? Anti-zombies.
The anti-zombie argument. I was just going to mention it, which I think actually sneaked out a little bit ahead of Richard's, which you just summarise the argument. Yeah.
What do you think of them? You buy this?
Well, it all depends on what you how you conceptualize experience, doesn't it? If you conceptualize experience in as irreducibly subjective, irreducibly private, first personal, then you certainly can conceive of physical duplicates that like it, because conceiving of a physical duplicate, you're simply conceiving of something described in third person terms. So yes, if you think of consciousness as irreducibly subjective, then you can't conceive of anti-zombies. But if you think of consciousness just as whatever this is, I don't know, it's whatever it's occurring with me now, and you don't add further elements into that it can't be characterized in functional terms, then yeah, that's exactly what physicalists have been imagining for, well, since they've been physicalists.
But what do you think about? Do you think about? It's a good objection to those arguments?
Well, it depends which way you want to go to which. Well, I think when I wrote my paper, I was on the verge. I think I was probably a type B physicalist at that time when I first came, because I came up with this argument a long time ago, and I only published in 2006. But now I think there are certain ways of conceptualizing. I think the problem is in how we could start, where we start with the concept of consciousness that we begin with. And of course, if you begin with a concept that builds in something like irreducible subjectivity into it, then the zombie argument works, and the anti-zombie argument doesn't work. But if you don't build that in, then it works fine.
Very interesting. I'm glad you answered that, because I can't remember what I think about zombies. So you gave a good answer. Okay, Chotzialoni. For Keith, what ideas of personal identity work well together with illusionism? For example, those explored by Parfit, or open-closed empty individualism described by Daniel Kolak. So if you are a kind of bourgeois illusionist, what sort of idea of bourgeois personal identity are you going to go for?
Well,
sorry, ignore that stupidness.
I think any that don't build in some sort of dualism are probably going to be compatible with it. For myself, animalism, that's my default position, but I don't think illusionism requires that. All that's excluded, I think, is anything that builds in any sort of commitment to non-physical individuation by non-physical properties or phenomenal properties, or something like that. So I think it's pretty open. I think it's a separate debate, but for my money, animalism's the way to go. We're animals. Yeah, you're not like you bourgeois intellectuals with your psychological conditions of identity and your mind uploading. We're animals. We are from in Yorkshire.
I wish I hadn't raised this starting point, because
you're not going to.
You're doing a good job of making my position. But do you know, actually, I think one of the first times I thought about consciousness was I happened to, in a secondhand bookshop, pick up a book by Lenin, where he said that, we're purely material or purely physical. And I was thinking, what about our feelings? So I think anyway, it's Lenin's fault. Anyway, he was more on your side.
You were acting against him.
Oh, another fine-tuning by Richard Neighbor about fine-tuning book. I think it is a misconception that probabilities can be assigned to how something is. You can only have a probability that something happens. Sounds interesting. I suppose I'd want to hear that cashed out a bit more. I mean, why can be assigned to something probability? I mean, go back to the prizes behind one of the three gates. That's a fact about what is, isn't it? It is behind one of the three gates.
But that's
I don't
just
know
an epistemic
which.
probability, isn't it?
Yeah, I'm talking about, yeah, but I think the fine-tuning
There's the
argument is
question
rooted in
about objective
epistemic.
probability.
Yeah, okay, so it's another confusion. I think this is a very common misconception of the fine-tuning argument. It's a Bayesian argument. It's to do with epistemic probabilities. It's to do with what we should believe based on our epistemological situation. What best fits with the observations we find. And so when we're thinking about the constants could have been otherwise, that is in an epistemic sense. I mean, it's this is too technical, but like most philosophers think water is necessarily H2O. But if you're evaluating in Bayesian terms the evidence that water is H2O, you'll be considering scenarios in which it's not H2O, and most philosophers think they are impossible. Whether they are or not, it makes a point that we're interested in probabilistic reathring. We're interested in epistemic
I think we need to
probability.
do a mind chat with you and Mark to thrash
Oh
this
yeah.
all out.
Well, we
And
are going to, aren't we?
I can moderate it. Because
Yes.
a lot of people want to talk about this, and I know you and he have been having a vigorous exchange, and that it's been a roller coaster of conviction and doubt on your part.
Well, yeah, people might want to check out my most recent Substack, how he made me lose cosmic hope for a week. The week, I didn't say in that blog post, it was the week of my bloody birthday. I went through my 46th birthday not believing in cosmic hope, cosmic
Mark
purpose.
O'Brien spoiled my birthday.
What a bastard. He's even more of a bastard than you. Okay, Tim, should we give Tim Ange another question? He's had lots of questions. They've been good questions,
Well,
but
they have been good
should
questions.
we come back to him if we've got time?
Maybe there are other questions.
Yeah, sorry, Tim. You're having good questions, but you've had about a million. James the Wise. Q, what are your thoughts on phenomenology? And are you familiar with contemplative science? It's basically advanced meditators collaborating with psychologists and neuroscientists to study consciousness. What do you think, Professor Frankish?
Stick a hetero on the front and I'm fine with it. It's a fascinating way of investigating the human mind. Just be careful how you interpret the reports you get. Just don't take them for a window, transparent window on a immediately known reality. Take them as reports that have sources that may be unknown to us.
Do you want to remind listeners what heterophenomenology is, in case they...
Well, it's the idea that you encourage people to give first-person reports on their experience, and you encourage them to give it in as much detail as they can. And to explore the subtleties of experience, the way that we experience objects not simply as a sort of flat screen, but we experience their relation to each other. We experience them as solid objects with a hidden side to them, and so on. We have this rich engagement with the world, which as we contemplate our experience, we can start to articulate, and it's a whole methodology of doing this, and it's fine. And it's very interesting because our brains are doing stuff that leads to those reports. Okay, so our perceptual processes are such as to yield those kinds of reports when we attend to them and introspect and try to articulate the results. And that's very interesting. That undoubtedly is a source of evidence that will feed into our theorizing about the mind and the brain. But it's not something we take as the last word. It's the first word, and it's like all observations. It's these reports must be interpreted in the light of theory, and cannot be taken as a priori constraints on subsequent theorizing. So that's the hetero bit. It gets the hetero means other. It's phenomenology that is interpreted. I'm not quite sure. I'm not quite sure where the other is supposed to be. But my understanding is it's an other person's take on your phenomenological reports. We don't take them as autophenomenology that I say it and therefore that's the last word about my mind. It's I say it, and then others, or I collectively with others, must interpret it So it's subject to the normal. All these reports are subject to the normal processes of interpretation that all other observation statements are subject to in the light of wider theory. And indeed, meditation and other ways of altering our experience are absolutely, again, wonderful sources of data, but data that needs to be interpreted in the light of wider theorizing, just as perceptual data does. There's no magical insight into anything, I think.
Cool. Jed Serrano, Philip, how does your Christianity inform your panpsychism? Does it correspond with any Christian doctrines? I would say there's no necessary connection, but I suppose I'm attracted to a kind of panentheism where the universe is inside God in some sense. The universe is an aspect of God. God pervades the universe, as many mystics testify to in many different traditions. I'm reading a good book recently. Now I can't remember the philosopher's name. Critchley, is it a book on mysticism? A book aimed at a general audience, which it's on mysticism, but it's actually mainly Christian mysticism. Which has always been a minority thread in the Western Christianity. Sometimes heretical, sometimes they got burned, but usually a respectable minority thread. Whereas in the Eastern tradition, it's been the main thing has been very mystical about God and the universe coming together. So, and I suppose I think that makes it's easy to make sense of if you think God, if you think consciousness pervades the universe, easy to make sense of God pervading the universe. Otherwise, it's sort of like God in the universe is sort of like Ghost in the Machine or something. Joanna Leidenhag is the person to read on this. Who was one influence on me in my journey here, who has written a lot of really interesting stuff on a panpsychist version of Christianity. She was interviewed with me on BBC Radio 4's In Our Time on panpsychism, and we had a beer afterwards, and that was very influential on me. Another one by we've got all people. Okay, so now we've only got people who've been on before, so maybe let's go back to Tim Ange and grounds for Chalmers' premise that an a priori entailment from structural functional descriptions requires a structural functional analysis, conceptual hooks. Oh my gosh, is this me or you? This is getting into the techie weeds, isn't it? This is someone who knows philosophy. I think this might be something we might both agree on, actually. Keith, what do you think?
I think that the core intuition that drives all of this is that consciousness is irreducibly subjective, irreducibly private. And if you have that, then zombies and all of the, Mary and all of this stuff is perfectly conceivable, because you don't get from a description of some objective description to some essentially subjective one. If you can't cash out the subjective descriptions in terms of perceptual sensitivities, dispositions to report, dispositions to react, and so on, you can certainly have subjective talk. My political opinions are subjective, but you can still find out all about them and how I came to have them and so on, and I can articulate them. There may be nothing secret about them. But if you think there's something about and similarly with my reactions to the world, they're subjective. It's me reacting, not you. But you can find out all about how I react to the world. But if there's some aspect of this that is deeply subjective, irreducibly subjective, that can't be accessed by any, that can't be deduced from any description of my engagement with the world or what my brain is doing or anything like this, and then of course zombies are going to be conceivable. That's built into the concept you started with. Built in that Mary won't notice. All of this flows from that. And that's why I want to invite people to try and look at it a different way. Because once you buy that, the game's over. It's finished. Finished right up square one.
Yeah. Yeah, you make a good point, Keith, that maybe we waste time with these more technical arguments when there's a more fundamental intuition behind it. Specifically the question, I suppose in my work, like my book, Consciousness and Fundamental Reality, you know, I try to think like with reduction, the high level stuff is supposed to be like nothing over and above. And that's how can it be nothing over and above? What does that mean? It's either some people say either it's something more or it's not something, or it's identity. You know, so to try and as a sort of middle way between identity and something more, if you can give some kind of analysis,
Well, that's what
at least
functionalism
rough
does.
and ready analysis. Yeah, like a functionalist analysis. So that's why I think, you know, and that's partly why I reject kind of reductionist panpsychism as well, because I don't think you can give any kind of reductionist analysis of our consciousness. I've got a lot of papers that nobody reads pressing this in the technical details.
Do you think that is linked, as I suggested, to the intuition of irreducible subjectivity? In fact, grounded in that intuition. Do you think that's the core of it?
I agree with you that that's what's at the foundation of physicalism versus anti-physicalism. But maybe not actually, because then you get like a distinction between sort of reductionist and non-reductionist panpsychists. And some of them say, well, we don't need this analysis business. Whereas I'm more inclined to think if you're going to have real reduction, you do need something like an analysis. Like I always give the examples of parties, you know, a party is nothing over and above the people partying, because all it is for there to be a party is for there to be people dancing and drinking, etc. So the analysis plays a role in why the party is nothing over and above the party is. So I think if consciousness, if our consciousness is going to be reduced either in a physicalist or a panpsychist way, there's got to be some kind of analysis that opens it up to reduction. And us anti-physicalists have already rejected the functionalist one, and it's not clear what else would play the role. Maybe we'd agree on this, Keith.
I wonder. Yes. I wonder if this. I wonder if subjectivity isn't at the heart of the combination problem. How can subjectivities combine into a larger subjectivity? I'm inclined increasingly to think that the emphasis should be more on that than on gesturing at some property that is possessed by the brain but is somehow hard to detect. We need the notion of what notion of subject of a self is at play here. Often it's taken to be just sort of read off the idea of there's subjectivity, there's a subjective property, so there's a subject. But then what the hell is that? You know? I'm inclined to think it's bound up with intuitions about. Ultimately, I think there are deep Cartesian intuitions here about the self.
Yeah.
Yeah. Anyway, but we get a bit into the weeds there. But yeah, no, it's a good question. Good question.
Very good. Okay, right. 2 very quick questions now. I'm going to have to feed my starving children. Yes. Another one from Links. Are there any plausible alternatives to everything and anything being either determined causally or acausally or random, brute, unexplained occurrence? Oh, I've got views on this.
Go on then.
What do you think, Keith? You're going to say probably not, aren't you?
Either determined or random.
Well, it's the old. I mean, it's very.
Tell me what the alternatives are.
It's a very common objection to libertarian free will, isn't it? That among academic philosophers, as well as, you know, popular discussions of this, that, you know, either there's a prior cause or it's just totally random. I follow Jonathan Lowe, who was a very influential philosopher at my university, who said, well, no, the reason libertarian free will, if it exists, is not just random, and is because it involves rational responsiveness. You respond to considerations of value. If you decide whether to cheat on your wife, it's like, this pleasure gives me a reason to act. My responsibility and care about my marriage gives me a reason to act, and you're weighing up those reasons. So it's the responsiveness to reasons, even if it's totally undetermined. The fact that it essentially involves responsiveness to reasons means it's not just meaningless and like a random radioactive isotope probabilistic decay. Keith, you're going to disagree with this.
No,
you have the
responsiveness to reasons is very important, but I don't think it's incompatible with.
Oh, I'm not saying it's incompatible, but But does it give a response to this objection that libertarian free will is incoherent? Because if a free choice is not lacks a prior cause, it's just random. This is supposed to respond to have a middle way.
I mean, you can imagine a totally undetermined decider. I'm not sure how that being would make its decisions, but I suppose I can imagine one. Just somehow the reasons somehow it appreciates the reasons, and these somehow influence its decisions in a non-causal way. I don't know. Can I imagine that? I don't know. I mean, it seems to me that those reasons would have to be causally effective, and therefore they would have to be somehow encoded in the deciders' cognitive makeup. And I think a lot of people can. I mean, they seem to, because they seem to believe in it. So I suppose it is possible to imagine reasons exerting some sort of magical force upon our behavior, but can't make much sense of it, really.
Well, Keith, you know, as always, we've had a very enjoyable discussion. If people want to know the tasting guides to my gin and tonic, send me an email. And you know, I wish you a very merry and enjoyable Christmas break. And to viewers and listeners, if you celebrate Christmas, have a great Christmas, whether heretical Christian or atheist secularization, or just have a nice break. I'm rambling now, but I think we can both agree. Did you want to, you know, that you know, Christmas?
Go on.
Is, you know,
go on, you bourgeois bastard. Say it.
We didn't have the discussion about whether it's okay to lie to your kids about Santa Claus. Anyway, Christmas is wherever it is,
and nowhere else.